Hello everyone, welcome to the Tour Guide Service Skills class. Today we'll specifically discuss the guided explanation of a certain type of landscape. The first thing to learn is the guided explanation of geomorphic landscapes. When conducting the explanation of geomorphic landscapes, tour guides are not only required to master the basic common sense of geomorphic landscapes, but also should grasp the basic touring procedures and methods of geomorphic landscapes and the skills of tour guide explanation. In the explanation, it is necessary to combine the dissemination of knowledge, aesthetic guidance, and cultural experience. There are 5 types of landforms on the earth, and the main forms are plateaus, plains, basins, mountains, and hills. Among these, mountains are the areas where tourism resources are the most concentrated, thus becoming the most valuable natural tourism resources for tourism. The guiding skills of geomorphic landscapes are mainly reflected in the guiding skills of mountainous landscapes. The skills of explaining mountainous landscapes include the following points. Select appropriate explanation contents. Mountainous landscapes has diverse forms and distinct features. In the actual explanation process, tour guides should appropriately select the explanation content according to the landscape features and tourists' touring interests. Generally speaking, tour guides can select the content of the explanation from the perspective of science, aesthetics, culture, and the status in the tourism industry and other perspectives. For example, the tour guide commentary of Lushan Mountain. The first is the perspective of science popularization. Lushan Mountain is a fault uplift and formed a host fault block mountain. This makes the cliff walls on all sides of Lushan Mountain steep and broken. The canyons deep and secluded, and the waterfalls flying down, while the relative height on the mountain is relatively small. The valleys are broad, and the terrain undulation is not large, forming a peculiar terrain with steep outside and flat inside. The attributes of Lushan Mountain's rocks are complex, mainly metamorphic rocks, sandstones, and granites. Lushan Mountain is also known as the birthplace of the theory of quaternary glaciation in China, and the Natural Museum of the Quaternary Glacial Relics in China. According to the research of the famous geologist Li Siguang, Lushan Mountain experienced 3 glacial actions during the Quaternary Glacial period. As a result, it forms the U-shaped valleys of the East Valley and the West Valley, as well as glacial relics such as the Flying Stone. The second is from the aesthetic perspective. In the Tang Dynasty, the great poet Bai Juyi said that the marvelous and beautiful Lushan Mountain is the best in the world, which expresses the beauty of Lushan Mountain. Lushan Mountain is located on the north bank of the Yangtze River and faces Poyang Lake to the southeast. More than 90 peaks in the area are connected, forming a beautiful scenery of overlapping mountains, flying springs and waterfalls, deep and lush forests, and a vast sea of clouds. Its seasonal changes are characterized by warm spring, cool summer, pleasant autumn scenery, and no severe cold in winter, showing different kinds of beauty in different seasons. Some people describe it as spring like a dream, summer like drops, autumn like intoxication, and winter like jade. The warm air, abundant rainfall, lush vegetation, and fresh environment make Lushan a famous summer resort in China. The third is the cultural perspective. Lushan Mountain is renowned for its rich cultural connotations. Since Sima Qian climbed Lushan Mountain in the south and observed Yu's dredging of Zhoujiang for thousands of years, famous people of all dynasties have climbed Lushan Mountain continuously. The hometown of the Eastern Jin Dynasty pastoral poet Tao Yuanming is at the foot of Lushan Mountain, where he wrote the immortal poems The Tale of the Peach Blossom Spring and Ode to Return to the Native Place. The Tang Dynasty poet Li Bai once climbed Lushan Mountain 3 times, leaving the magnificent poem. The waterfall flows down 3,000 feet. I suspect it is the Milky Way falling from the ninth heaven. Bai Zhiyi was demoted to Zhoujiang for 4 years and formed an inseparable bond with Lushan. The statement, one cannot see the true face of Lushan Mountain just because one is in the mountain, by the Song Dynasty writer Zhu Shi, is truly a popular philosophical saying. More than 1,500 literary giants such as Wang Xizhi, Han Yu, Yan Zhenqing, Lu You, Wen Tianxiang, Zhu Xi, Kang Youwei have successively climbed Lushan Mountain, leaving behind more than 4,000 poems, Ci and Fu. Qin Shi Huang and Han Wudi also climbed Lushan Mountain. Zhu Yuanzhang ordered to confer the title of Lu Yue on Lushan Mountain. Since the Jin Dynasty, there have been more than 260 monographs on Lushan Mountain. Tour guides should accurately control the pace of explanation. When explaining mountainous landscapes, it is important to pay attention to controlling the rhythm well. Generally speaking, the explanation should be carried out in sections according to the touring route, but the overall characteristics of the mountain landscape should be explained in advance to give tourists an overall impression. For those transient landscapes, such as sea of clouds, Buddha light, and so on, the tour guide should remind tourists in advance and inform them how to appreciate it. The explanation of the tour guide should also be in line with the scenery, so that what you see and what you say, which can not only improve the vividness of the explanation, but also facilitate the tourist's understanding of the scenery and deepen the impression of the scenery. Indeed, the amount of tour guide explanation is not the more, the better. It is necessary to leave sufficient time for tourists to enjoy the scenery by themselves. The third point is to pay attention to the vivid and lively language. If the tour guide can appropriately introduce those vivid pictographic landscapes to the tourists in the explanation of the mountain landscape, it will add more interest to the tourist's aesthetic process. In the Qin Dynasty, Wei Yuan once said after visiting the 5 sacred mountains, Mountain Tai is like sitting, Mount Song is like lying, Mount Hua is like standing, Mount Hen is like walking, only Mount Hen is like flying. He vividly depicts the pictographic beauty of the 5 sacred mountains here, making it appear vivid and lifelike. Tour guides never lack commentary, nor do they lack the ability to memorize the words. What teachers need to remind students is that tour guide explanations should be full of humanistic care and professional feelings so that the explanation can be more touching. For example, after explaining the crustal movement of the mountains and the original sandstone, the tour guide squatted down, gathered some gravel and dust, blew the sand on the ground, then unscrewed the water bottle and poured the water on the sand to simulate the scene of wind and sand erosion. Then he mixed the mud to simulate crustal movement, leaving a deep impression on the tourists. That's all for today's study on landscape morphology skills. Bye.